Enzorecto, kalaban ang katiwalian at kasinungalingan, kakampi sa katotohanan at kabutihan.
For nearly 4 decades, the 1987 Philippine Constitution has stood as the bulwark of our democratic institutions. It emerged from a moment of national renewal, embodying the collective aspiration for justice, liberty, and accountable governance. Yet time, historical experience, and the evolving exigencies of governance compel us to revisit the Constitution's wording with objectivity. Certain unclear provisions bear the unmistakable marks of drafting errors, deficiencies that must be addressed with the aim of coming up with a charter founded on unambiguous language. I rise today not in opposition to the 1987 Constitution, but in fidelity to its enduring promise. The Constitution is a living and breathing instrument, not because it is meant to bend to every political trend, but because its vitality depends on its clarity, coherence, and adaptability to the needs of the people. The imperative of textual clarity in constitutional drafting cannot be overemphasized. The Constitution draws its authority from the definitiveness of its language. When its provisions are vague or inconsistent, the result is not a richer interpretative tradition, but a weaker legal foundation. Madam Speaker, the law derives its authority from the precision of its language. As the supreme law of the land, the Constitution must speak with clarity and force. Its provisions must be comprehensible not only to courts and legislators, but to the citizens whose rights it enshrines. Unclear constitutional provisions strain judicial resources and time. Ambiguities invite constant litigation, requiring the Supreme Court to resolve textual uncertainties rather than focus on pressing constitutional questions or develop coherent doctrine. High-profile constitutional disputes are time-consuming and delay other urgent matters, turning the judiciary into an arbiter of political standoffs rather than a guardian of constitutional order. We have seen how ambiguity has led to political crises and institutional paralysis. These gaps in the constitutional text erode the stability that they are meant to preserve. Even worse, the erosion of legal certainty undermines the rule of law itself. Vague provisions permit multiple interpretations, encouraging selective or politically motivated enforcement, and blurring the line between lawful governance and abuse of discretion. It is within these gray zones that power is most easily exploited. Constitutional loopholes, often rooted in imprecise language, allow opportunistic actors to justify unlawful conduct under the guise of plausible interpretation. Without clarity, checks and balances can be undermined and constitutional protections rendered hollow. Today, I submit to this august chamber that while the provisions of our Constitution are noble in aspiration, certain provisions are marked by ambiguity and procedural deficiency. These deficiencies do not merely complicate interpretation. They obstruct reform, hinder effective governance, and erode public trust. As we have seen with recent events, even a phrase as seemingly to forthwith proceed can cause considerable discord in its interpretation. Article 11, Section 3 and 4 on impeachment states that in case the verified complaint or resolution of impeachment is filed by at least 1/3 of all the members of the House, the same shall constitute the articles of impeachment, and the trial by the Senate shall forthwith proceed. While the word forthwith was intended to signal urgency and mandatory action, its implementation has been repeatedly delayed, sidestepped, or redefined, with the Senate, through a majority vote, remanding the articles of impeachment to the House of Representatives. Very recently, we witnessed the institutional friction caused by the legislative branch's inconsistent interpretation of this mandate, one which sparked public confusion and which continues to do so. What should have been a procedural safeguard against delay has instead become a source of deadlock and controversy. This development raises serious constitutional and jurisprudential questions. Does the legislature now view the recent interpretation as forthwith, as applicable to all similar clauses in the Charter? Can the clear urgency mandated by constitutional language now be indefinitely stalled under the guise of interpretative discretion? This episode illustrates the far-reaching implications of imprecise constitutional terminology. Even a single ambiguous word can become the justification for legislative inaction, procedural manipulation, or worse, the loss of accountability itself. Among the clearest examples of constitutional ambiguity are provisions that were the result of acknowledged drafting lapses, a fact admitted by no less than the framers themselves. These are not matters of judicial interpretation. These are clear textual flaws identified from the very beginning, yet left unresolved in the body of the Charter. I do not stand before this chamber to prescribe solutions to these complex legal dilemmas. But I do contend with deep conviction that the Filipino people deserve a constitution that speaks plainly and very clearly. A constitutional convention offers the most prudent, transparent, and participatory mechanism to address these enduring ambiguities. It allows the people, through their chosen delegates, to correct textual deficiencies, reconcile contradictions, remove ambiguities, institutionalize much-needed reform, and ensure that the foundational law of the land meets the needs of a dynamic and democratic society. A constitutional convention ensures singularity of purpose, that is, to formulate and propose changes to the Constitution. Unlike a constituent assembly, they will not be preoccupied nor derailed with lawmaking, oversight functions, and impeachment concerns. Through a constitutional convention, conflict of interest would be avoided, broader representation. Wherefore, Madam Speaker, I will be filing forthwith a joint resolution calling for the convening of a constitutional convention. Not a constituent assembly, but a constitutional convention. Once again, Madam Speaker, this is not a call to discard the Constitution. It is a call to complete and correct it. One of the things that we have found is that there are constant cases being filed in the Supreme Court, which have to do about interpretation of constitutional provisions. You know, everybody has been saying for the past 20, 30 years that the Constitution needs a lot of correction already. Because the Constitution was first drafted for a unicameral government, unicameral legislature. But towards the end of the Constitutional Convention, there was a sudden change to a bicameral legislature. However, many of the provisions in the Constitution remained as provisions for a unicameral legislature. And so this has led to a lot of problems over the many decades past. There's always been disagreement about whether votes should be joint or separate, whether the Constitution meant this or that. There are other things that have cropped up because of modern issues such as the West Philippine Sea. And our Constitution has not been flexible enough to address all of these issues. So instead of diving into the controversies that beset all of us, we believe that the best course of action is try to attempt a solution at the root cause of this. We believe that if we correct and update our Constitution now, that many of the disputes that we see in front of us would not have been here or can be avoided in the future. Little things like the meaning of certain words, always cause disagreement and confusion among everyone. So nakakahiya sa ating mga kababayan, ang lagi natin pinag-aawayan ay kung anong ibig sabihin ng isang salita. Siguro naman iisa lang diksyonaryo yung sinusundan natin lahat. Kung bakit napakaraming kahulugan ng isang salita na ating babanggitin, ay hindi nila siguro naintindihan. So para mawala na lahat itong mga alinlangan na ganito, naisip namin na magpaandar na tayo ng isang constitutional convention. Bakit constitutional convention at hindi constituent assembly katulad ng mga panukala ng iba naming mga kasama dito sa Kamara? Ang constituent assembly, dagdag trabaho sa congressman at sa senador. In other words, sa ibabaw ng lahat ng ginagawa naming mga trabaho, at nakikita nyo naman, inuumaga yung Congress dito kuminsan, kakatalakay sa mga panukalang nasa harap namin. Kung dadagdagan nyo pa yan ng mga paggamot ng mga problema sa Constitution, wala na talagang mangyayari dito. Hindi matatapos yung karamihan na napaka-importanting trabahong gagawin. Sa budget lang, nakikita natin pag may budget deliberations dito, di ba? Lahat tayo dito, inuumaga. At yan, wala pa masyado nagtatanong. Ngayon sa panahon na ito na ang daming mga tanong tungkol sa ating mga budget, siguro asahan nyo na magkakapuyatan tayo sa mga darating na buwan. Kung patungan nyo pa yan na mga panukala ng pagbago sa ating saligang batas, ay talagang wala nang mangyayari. So para hindi maantala yung pagbabago na kailangan natin sa saligang batas at hindi naman matabi yung mga trabaho natin dito sa legislatura, naisip namin mag-constitutional convention na tayo. At diyan siguro ay maaari tayong kumuha ng mga bagong mga mamumuno at namumuno sa ating mga iba't ibang mga distrito, yung mga taong talagang sagad sa pag-aral sa ating mga batas at saligang batas. At sila na siguro ang tutulong sa atin magdala sa ngayong panahon ng mga dapat ipasok sa ating saligang batas. So yan ang rason kung bakit gagawin namin yung panukalang yan na magkaroon ng Constitutional Convention at yan gagawin namin forthwith.
Halikan na kasama ka, Bunyog. Kapag buklod ay may pag-asa, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, isa ang pananaw. Sa bagong Pilipinas ang bunyog isisigaw. Bunyog, bunyog.